On most mornings inside the bright studio of today, the cameras switch on with familiar ease, and Craig Melvin greets the audience with the calm, reassuring tone that viewers have come to trust over the years. Yet beneath that steady delivery lies a quiet mental discipline developed through decades of reporting the kinds of stories no one ever hopes will happen. The world of broadcast journalism often asks anchors to process tragedy in real time, natural disasters, sudden loss, heartbreaking headlines, and to translate those moments into clear, compassionate language for millions of people who are waking up and trying to make sense of the same news. For Craig, learning how to carry that emotional weight without letting it overwhelm him has become something of a personal science, a careful balance between empathy and composure that grows sharper with experience. Early in his career, he believed resilience meant simply pushing feelings aside and focusing on the script in front of him. But as the years passed, he realized that approach could quietly erode a person's sense of balance. Emotions denied had a way of lingering long after the cameras turned off. The real skill, he discovered, was not in avoiding emotion, but in acknowledging it while still remaining steady enough to guide viewers through difficult moments. Craig often describes the experience of live broadcasting as standing at the intersection between information and humanity. The facts must be accurate and immediate, yet the tone must also respect the emotional gravity of what is being reported. In the control room, producers may speak quickly through an earpiece, adjusting scripts as breaking details arrive, while graphics shift on the screen behind him. In those moments, Craig has learned to pause internally for a fraction of a second, grounding himself before speaking. That brief pause, almost invisible to anyone watching, has become part of the quiet science of resilience. He reminds himself that the people at home, many of them older viewers who have lived long enough to recognize the fragility of the world, are not simply looking for information. They are looking for reassurance that someone is guiding them through the moment with clarity and compassion. When particularly heavy stories unfold, Craig sometimes reflects afterward on how those experiences shape the emotional rhythm of his life. Conversations at home with his wife, Lindsay Charnayak, have often helped him process the unseen side of the work. Lindsay understands the emotional demands better than most, having spent years covering high-pressure sports events where the atmosphere can change instantly from triumph to heartbreak. In the quiet of the evening, after the day's broadcast has ended and the urgency of headlines fades into the background, Craig and Lindsay often talk about the strange paradox of public storytelling. Journalists must remain composed while discussing events that are deeply human and sometimes devastating. Lindsay once told him something that stayed with him long afterward, that resilience is less like armor and more like flexibility, the ability to bend without breaking. Those words reshaped how Craig approached his role. Instead of distancing himself emotionally from difficult stories, he began allowing a measured level of empathy to inform his voice and presence on the broadcast. Viewers seemed to notice the difference. Letters and messages arrived from people across the country, many in their 60s and 70s, sharing how much they appreciated a tone that felt thoughtful rather than rushed. These viewers understood the emotional complexity of watching the world change over decades. They had lived through moments of uncertainty themselves and recognized sincerity when they heard it. Craig began to see his role not simply as delivering news, but as helping audiences navigate the emotional landscape surrounding it. During particularly intense news cycles, he developed small personal rituals to maintain perspective. Sometimes it meant stepping outside the studio for a few minutes after a broadcast, breathing in the fresh air and letting the sounds of the city remind him that life continued beyond the headlines. Other times, it meant returning home and spending quiet moments with Lindsay and their children, reconnecting with the ordinary rhythms of family life that kept him grounded. Over time, he came to realize that resilience in journalism was built not in dramatic moments, but in these simple acts of balance, moments when the mind was allowed to reset and recover from the weight of the day's stories. For viewers who had spent their own careers facing responsibility and pressure, this idea often resonated deeply, the understanding that strength was not measured by how much a person could endure without pause, but how thoughtfully they could care for themselves while continuing to serve others. Each morning when Craig steps back into the studio and the red camera light signals the start of another broadcast, he carries that philosophy with him. The headlines may change, and some days may bring stories heavier than others, but the underlying purpose remains the same: to help people understand the world without losing sight of their shared humanity. And so, in that brief, quiet second before he begins speaking, Craig Melvin draws on the lessons he has gathered over years of reporting, conversations with Lindsay Charnayak, and the wisdom of experience itself. Resilience is not about becoming immune to difficult truths, but about meeting them with clarity, empathy, and the steady belief that even in the face of troubling headlines, calm understanding can still guide the morning forward.